Welcome to Lost Pinata, the podcast where we talk about the elements of your creative lifestyle. Today, I'm Terrence.
And I'm Dave. If you enjoy this episode, please like, follow, and share the program with your friends.
And today we are talking about sequels.
Sequels. So let's define what a sequel is like compared to like a remake.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, a sequel is a continuation of a story, right? Like you had part one and now you've got part two, so you're following it. It's not just redoing what you just did.
Well, but I mean, like, I think there's more to it, though, in the sense of, like, if you were watching a television program, you would have different episodes, right?
Right.
But the episode 2 is not a sequel to episode 1 per se. It's just part of it's a chapter,
Well,
so like, how is a sequel would be kind of...
Well, isn't that the same as like, you would consider, it's still sequential. It's just not.
It's true.
That's if your story continues, if it's not like a sitcom where nothing's really changed from episode to episode, it's just.
Well, except that a lot of sequels are. I guess what I'm thinking though is a sequel is a self-contained story, as opposed to just a chapter in one story.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Okay. But I mean, if you think of sequels, oftentimes they're very similar to. I mean, if you look at like action movies in the 80s, I'm thinking they would try to do the same thing.
I was gonna say, yeah, Die Hard 2, Die Hard 3. That was all the same movie.
It would all be variation on a theme.
Yeah.
Whereas I think like a chapter in a longer story, you actually get real change. Right. Going on from chapter to chapter.
Right. Star Wars being an example of that. There was a radical difference and it created an entire arc, in fact. But each film was separate. The original 3 Star Wars, beginning with New Hope, I say.
They were, but they also shared elements. I mean, then of course you get the later Star Wars films where they're recycling all the same stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would think that like the Marvel MCU movies, those tend to be more chapter oriented. I mean, there's sequels because they are self-contained.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess there's I don't know. I think the contrast between a sequel and a remake are kind of interesting because a remake oftentimes is an update. It's the same story, but they'll update a lot of like characters to make them more modern or to deal with more modern concerns. So it's different, but it doesn't have that sense of a linear, change.
Right. I guess, and that's actually, I see your distinction there between a trilogy, which is really just an arc of multiple chapters, as opposed to, say, like Beetlejuice, where you had Beetlejuice, and then, but 25 years later or something, they came out with a sequel, which was separate and apart from the first one. It's following the same characters past that, but it's a separate story. It wasn't another chapter leading to a third, like Lord of the Rings or like Dune or something like that.
Yeah. Dune. Yeah, that's a good point there because Dune 2 is part 2. It's not a sequel.
Right.
Or is it a sequel? I mean, I guess it's kind of a sequel. I just think like if you're in a book and you have different chapters, the chapter 2 is not a sequel to chapter 1. I think that would be wrong.
Right. So, I guess the question is like, we've spent so much time defining it.
I got a philosophy degree. We like to define.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point, though. You put more thought into what the term sequel is for me.
Well, maybe we should talk about why sequels happen at all.
Right.
Why are there? Why can't we just let standalone? A work be a standalone work.
Sometimes it's because they're beloved characters and you just want to go back to that world and you really enjoyed it. I mean, financially, it might just be that it did really well and you want to cash in again.
But the way that you're able to cash in is because they become beloved characters.
Right.
So people don't want to let go of that thread.
Right. But that's also why you do remakes. So.
It is. It is.
But
And
I
I
think
think yeah,
it's
that's kind of tricky there because like from a financial standpoint, um, it's sort of hedging by
mhm,
doing a sequel. Because you figure that if we do something different, we have a better chance of it succeeding because we're attaching the names of previous characters
right,
to them, right?
right. Right. And that's, I mean, and that's the benefit of, doing, I mean, that's why a lot of like authors make trilogies, just because they start out with a book and they plan to make at least two more books with
Hmm.
these same characters so that they can continue to bank on, you liked the first one, you'll like the second one, and you're already familiar with it. So you don't have to explain as much and you can get right into story and you can, build upon that world, and you start with a solid foundation and you just build up from there. It's great. But it might limit you, I guess. It doesn't necessarily, but it might limit you because then you're not doing something new. If you're doing like the Die Hard type sequels where
Well, that's the thing. It's like the Die Hard movies might as well. I don't know. Die Hard did kind of. I mean, the original Die Hard was pretty unique. I mean, you had
right, right.
similar. I think it did change, but not. They didn't. I mean, the character kind of was. Well, I don't know. I didn't see all the Die Hard films, so I can't really comment on that too
I,
much.
I can't remember which one they kind of got a little bit away from it, and then I know when they got to the last couple, those were different. But that like that first and second one were the exact same film. I swear, they're
Well,
just
one
they
was in
just.
an airport, Yeah, I
I
mean,
think the second one was I think in an airport too. Like the second one was in the airport. The first one was in the
a building, yeah.
Nakatomi building. Yeah,
Well, I mean, which is kind of the exact opposite because, like, a building is confined space and an airport is about as open as you can get. But the idea was that, it was one man against these
yeah.
criminals.
But it was very, very so similar, so much the same. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. They want to take the elements of it and just add. I don't know. I talk about like Motown. I think in terms. I'm a musician, so I think in terms of music. But Motown, they would have a hit, and what they would try to do is they would try to basically take the same. I mean, just change the words. They
mm,
would. I mean, you actually listen to some of those Motown hits, and the chord structures are exactly the same, and even the grooves are pretty much the same. You could sing two or three songs over the same, groove track.
interesting.
But they changed the melody and the lyrics just enough, and sometimes not even the melody that much, But they did it just enough so that it would, and maybe change the singer and whatnot. Some of the superficial trappings. And this was great music, by the
Well,
way. I'm not.
yeah,
I
no,
love
no.
Motown. I don't
But I
want
think
to.
that was very much a trend. I mean, all throughout, like especially with pop music, where suddenly, I feel like was that the '90s or 2000s, whatever. Like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Jessica Simpson. Like you suddenly had this influx of young blonde singers that were all doing very similar music, and it was just kind of like, are they cloning them somewhere? What is
Well,
this?
you see, that's kind of interesting though, because it's like, if we're talking about sequels,
Hmm.
you know, you could do a sequel where you've changed, this element, but you keep the same names, right? The same people, the same characters.
Right.
But then, you could do the exact same film,
Yeah.
but it's a different, but you change the names, right? And
Hmm.
so it's basically the same kind of an action movie or something.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of Alien now, like Alien versus Aliens, where they
Well,
took.
that's a sequel. That's an actual sequel, and it does carry some thread forward.
Right, right, but it's the same character, same situation. They changed like I feel like same character, same situation. They changed an element and made it a bunch of aliens instead of one. You know, I mean,
The aliens are the common thread, though. You've
right,
got
right,
this, even though I guess Sigourney Weaver carried
yeah,
over from both of those, right?
right.
Her character, which was what was her character again?
Ripley.
Ripley. Thank you. Um, so yeah, so that
I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you're going to do a sequel, do that. But
make it
I'm just
bigger.
trying to think of another sequel that I think was up there. That was like the Terminator. That was a good series with
Well, they doubled the Terminators
yeah.
from 1 to 2.
But
They
then
brought
they
back the same Terminator, the same characters, and yeah, yeah,
wait, was it the second one was with the liquid guy, right?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, but then they turned the
It was
Terminator.
T2 Judgment Day, Terrence.
Yeah, okay, they turned him into the heroic figure. You know, he's on the side
Yeah.
fighting the. So it's like that was, a nice twist. I don't know.
So what's the purpose of a sequel then? I mean, I guess it's. I mean, I think of remakes. I think of like clones. They're just like clone stories that are basically
Hmm.
the same story but different characters. Then you have remakes, which are the same story but maybe updated in some way, superficial way. Um, and then you have sequels, which are the same characters, many of the same elements, but it sort of tries to at least put some superficial change into what's going
Right.
on. And that's different from a chapter,
Right.
which is part of a story where a lot of change happens and
Right.
it's more significant. So it's like from chapter to chapter, you don't necessarily expect to have the same elements.
I feel like when you get to your sequel, you're working on a new arc, right? Would that be fair? That you're no longer in the same arc that you were in with your first, or
I feel like it's a self-contained story.
right, right. Well, and that's in that not being a trilogy, it not being the like your second one, not being the middle of the arc, but it being a separate arc.
It, I would, yeah, I guess. I mean, because you can have overlapping arcs, right? You can
Right,
have a
right.
small arc and a large arc. But I think a chapter, and again, chapters and sequels, I mean, I think a sequel could be a chapter. I mean, I mean, you can't, I mean, these overlap here, right? A chapter could be a sequel, it could be a remake too. I mean, because
Yeah.
there's like, I'm thinking of like, do you remember The Color of Money?
Oh no,
Tom Cruise and Paul Newman were pool hustlers.
I remember the song.
Yeah, that's right. It's
I
in the
don't remember
way
the
that
movie
you
at all.
use it.
Yeah.
Um, well, that was a okay. You may this may be meaningless to you, but that was actually a sequel to a movie that Paul Newman did back in the '60s called The Hustler.
No.
And Paul Newman was a pool shark who went and he faced off against Jackie Gleason, who played a character called Minnesota Fats, and it was all it was just a small time pool shark who tried to basically go up against the big guys.
Hmm.
And The Color of Money is a sequel to that, but it's also a remake in its own way. I mean, Scorsese apparently loved that movie so much he decided to make a remake or a sequel.
Is it?
But I mean, basically, Tom Cruise is playing the Paul Newman role, and they go to a lot of the same locations,
Hmm.
and run into a lot of, like there's this one bar where they threaten to break your fingers. In fact, I think in the first movie they actually did break Paul Newman's fingers, but I think Paul Newman saved Tom Cruise in the second film. But there was a lot of the same stuff. But it was a remake, but it was a sequel as well. Um, but it didn't feel like a chapter because it didn't feel like it was part of the same story in the same way.
Okay. So, Dave, to wrap up this episode of Lost Pinata, I have a question. What is the one film? We'll just narrow it down to films. The one film that never had a sequel, that was just like probably will never get a sequel, that you would make a sequel for. I can give you mine if you first.
Yes, why don't we start with yours?
I'll start with mine. Did you ever see the movie Satisfaction with Justine Bateman? Back in, I know it's not anybody's favorite movie, but it's got Liam Neeson. It's got Debbie Harry. It has what's her name? Who's the voice of Jem and half of Luna? I forget her name. But it's all these people. I always wanted there to be a sequel, and I wanted to just be called Satisfied, and it would be like an update of those characters. Oh, it has Aaron Brockovich is in there too. She's in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's so many people in that movie. It's an enjoyable movie.
Okay. Okay.
But I always thought it would be great to make a sequel of that was just called Satisfied, and it would be like where they ended up, like 30 years later, and how that musical, because that was just like that little summer of music that they had together, and then everything fell apart, and then you wanted to know where they ended up and how that impacted their future, and so
I
that
see. So it's so
that
you
would be the
you
sequel.
want it you okay,
That
you
would
want
be
to do a
my. I'm Scorsese, and I can remake any movie I want to, whether anybody wants it or not.
That's the Scorsese film you're gonna
Yeah.
make? Boy, this is tough because like the ones that I remember, the standalone movies that I remember, I'm sort of like, I don't know. I'm kind of happy they were standalone because I don't know that I like sequels so much. I mean, I do like sequels, for some
Mhm.
things, but like the first movie that came to mind for me was this movie called John Dies at the End. And
Uh-huh.
have you seen that?
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's an amazing film, but
it
I
is.
don't know that I want a sequel to it. I mean, it's kind of like a Naked Lunch kind of movie.
Mhm.
It's, like William S. Burroughs by way of Lovecraft. But it's got a very philosophical side to it, and I really love that film. In fact, it's got a little bit of oh, actually, here you go. This is one, but again, it's like, do I want Big Trouble in Little China to be remade have a sequel? I love that film. I think it's such a self-contained little film.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't know that I would want it to have a sequel.
Just to revisit those characters again. That's I think the big
Well,
part for me.
maybe there are some series that didn't catch on. They were intended to be like, okay, do you remember? And I know they made a TV series of this, but there was a movie called The Golden Compass. It was
Was that like, I'm thinking of like a monkey's paw thing? Was that that?
no, it had polar bears in it. It was
Okay,
it
okay,
was it was
yes,
kind of a it was a very it was a riff on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
okay.
And they didn't make sequels because there was a big protest. There was there was a kind of a Christian protest against it, and
Oh,
there's a good reason for that. Because in the series is explicitly designed to be kind of a anti-Christian trilogy.
oh,
And my understanding, I haven't read it, but my understanding is that at the end of the series, God shows up as like this drunken lout or whatever, and it wasn't a thing in the first film, but that was the direction it would have gone, and I think yeah, and they actually, I think, kind of sanitized, not sanitized isn't the word, but they kind of softened the edges in the
oh.
first movie. But I thought that I didn't know that when I saw the movie, and I thought it was a really cool movie, and I liked it better than the recent Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe that had come out. And
Is
I
this
was really eager to see a sequel to it. So I would love to see a sequel to that. So I don't know. I guess I could direct it, but I got to read the second book, which I haven't done. And then I guess I'd have to figure out, ooh, do we want to, have God being a drunken loud or what?
is this the series that became that was his Dark Materials or whatever?
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I actually really enjoyed that, but it seemed to stall like their production or something, and I stopped watching it. And I don't.
Well, it may have been for the same reasons. It may have been because of Christian protests or something. But
I
um,
did not realize that any of that backstory on it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's at least that's my understanding. I'm sure I'm bastardizing the information. And mind you, I'm not like I actually like Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe a lot. I just thought that the Golden Compass was along the same lines and actually did a better job as a movie. Um, so I don't know. I guess there we go. Stalled trilogies that never went anywhere.
All
That may
right.
be my pick.
Well, Dave, that's it for this
Is
episode.
that it for this episode?
Yes, that is.
Well, folks, hey, all of you out there, you two people that are listening right now, if you enjoyed this, be sure to like, follow, and share the program with your friends. Also, check out my website at www.davidcoyle.com, and you'll find all of my music projects and my other podcasts and all that stuff.
Oh, and you can follow the Lost Pinata live stream Thursdays on Twitch, our 6 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific time, which would be 9
9
p.m. Eastern
p.m.
time, right?
Eastern time. What time
Uh,
is that? We're in Mountain time? It's 9.
Mountain time is 2 hours behind Eastern time.
All
So Pacific's 3 hours behind. Anyway, whatever the case, it's now time for you to whack your own pinata and see what shakes out.
Get lost.
Beat it!